Hey yo, what's up everybody? If you've already watched part 1 of this recap, you already know there are several lore bombshells dropped through the entire main plot. However, this subplot with Luuk has just as many important plot points, if not more. We even get tons of backstory crumbs about Luuk throughout this act. And for that reason, I'm making another video on this story, talking about the implications and some of the things that just happened in this quest and what it means for the entire story framework, because they are super important and they reveal quite a lot about Rover's past and the world of Solaris. By the way, this video is brought to you by Kuro Games. So without further ado, let's get it. So at the start of the quest, we're in class and we see a girl. She is reciting a passage upon the request of the principal, Lucilla. Her name is Nivora. Now, of course, we talked about before occurs. We end up talking with Ameth. No one else can see her. It makes a scene. But after class, Nivora agrees to meet with Segrika in the library. But actually, she ends up somewhere else. Actually, she ends up in the Frostlands. But we'll get to that point. So what are we doing? Well, we are coincidentally traveling to the Frostlands with Ameth. And when we get there, we run into Luuk right at the station. Ameth tells us that she doesn't really know him very well, but she knows he's been in Lahai for quite a long time, and she knows that we can trust him. So at the request of Ameth, we keep it G. We tell him we're there to see the Exostrider. And Luuk tells us he's heading the same way, and that he's only there to check out some researchers stationed there for long-term fieldwork. So Luuk helps Rover modify their bike for this new environment, and while we're getting ready to set out on our bike, we learn a few things. We learned that years ago, the Frostlands was a lush green forest, and the Roya natives were nomads of Lahai, and they walked in step with nature itself. However, the lament triggered a magnetic pole shift, and from then on, Lahai became the new pole of Solaris. We also learned that the lament wasn't the only cataclysm stirring back then. In the past, we had already reached the stars, but at some point, the Etheric Sea spread to cover all of Solaris. And from that moment on, Ameth continues saying, the universe locked its doors. We couldn't verify whether the sky was above us, whether it was real, or whether it was just a reflection, or really anything. Countless spacecrafts and attempts were lost, and basically, space exploration progress was pretty much abandoned for the most part, and space became out of reach. So that's where Star Torch comes in. The goal of Star Torch Academy is to use the Exostrider to explore space, whether that be through the Etheric Sea or through the Strider Gate. Rover replies, I understand the Etheric Sea part, but brother, how? You have amnesia, Rover. Prior to this act, the word Etheric Sea has only ever been uttered but a handful of times. Even SkyArk, the space station that we're going to come in contact with later, didn't fully understand. Anyway, Luuk reminds us of Lahai's history. Both the Exostrider and LF1 entered Solaris through the Strider Gate. The Academy theorizes the Strider Gate to be a gateway to outer space, and theorizes LF1 to be a Threnodian alien to Solaris. And after hearing this spawns the idea that the Threnodians just might be aliens to Solaris. What if they all are, just like the Sentinels? Which shifts the perspective of Solaris not only being a world where these things naturally occur, but a land that is being contested and fought over by outside forces. Those forces being the Sentinels, Rover, and his homeland versus Tacit Discords, Threnodians, and the Lament. So anyway, Luuk says that of course they want to open the Strider Gate, but in order to do so, the Exostrider must be awakened, and they must be prepared to take on LF1 head on after it opens. He believes that the depth of LF1's power and the danger goes beyond just void storms and void worms. He acknowledges LF1 is uniquely different than other Threnodians, because we can kind of glean clues of their nature and how they operate from the places they hail from and the cultures and civilizations that are around them. He says, but LF1, our knowledge remains blank. And this is a very interesting choice of words. Our knowledge remains blank. While I haven't delved too much into this in recent videos, LF1's power has a very interesting effect that is congruent with its representation as a black hole. People who come in contact with its void matter, who don't make it out, that is, people who die to LF1 or die under its effect, are completely forgotten, and traces of their existence are almost entirely, if not completely, erased. This is the entire reason people burn cassette tapes at the Academy, to have some memory that a person ever even existed should they fall to the void storms, or void matter, or any manifestation of LF1. So it's kind of no surprise that their knowledge of LF1 remains blank. We also learned that Luuk has been in Lahai for 20 years. Prior to this, he was a traveler, seeing what Solaris had to offer. However, a friend, aka Rover, asked him to come to Lahai to keep an eye on things for him. Now he just enjoys working and meeting with the students as a doctor. So as we head out with Luuk, an avalanche occurs, and we're racing through it until eventually we hear a voice. It's Nivora, the girl from our class earlier in this act. Apparently, she has a habit of going out alone in search of fallen debris. Actually, this feels like an understatement. This girl loves space garbage. Anything from space, probes, satellites, space stations, you name it. She loves it. Nivora says previous searches resulted in the discovery of lost records during the Lament, and even photos of other planets. She heard that Helios, and for those who don't know, Helios is the new sun. The new sun and its installation might have caused new debris fields to be exposed. So she's out here in search of fallen space debris. So anyway, Nivora finds her instrument stuck in the snow, and then she pulls it. And now there's an avalanche. We escape on our bike. I don't know how everybody else got out. I guess they just ran real fast. Anyway, the avalanche reveals something long hidden in the ice. It's a space station, and you know Nivora is losing her mind internally, but trying to just look mildly curious on the outside. Where this avalanche leaves us, we're kind of in this chasm. So Luuk contacts the Academy for a rescue team. But while we're here, in the meantime, in between time, Rover has a suggestion. We suggest and ultimately decide to take shelter inside and explore the space station until the rescue team arrives. Point of note, Nivora quickly and excitedly says she agrees, and Luuk gives a kind of mysterious knowing smirk. We're never truly given a complete picture of what Luuk is thinking, but throughout numerous scenes, it's implied that he knows a lot more than what's being conveyed verbally, and that he might not trust Nivora completely. As we begin to go inside, we notice two things right off the rip. One is that this place is filled with void matter, and two, once we get inside, we recognize the script that everything is written in down here is familiar. It's the same writing style we saw in Mount Firmament. The characters written here are from the Court of Savante. And for those who don't know, the Court of Savante was a research organization with labs and facilities all across Solaris, and they were always on the cutting edge of technology and Lament-related research. Anyways, Rover is blown away by how intact and just put together everything is in this spacecraft. By the way, we are unable to decipher this script. However, Luuk casually cranks up the hologram that introduces the place. More on these holograms in a bit, but it's almost like Luuk already knows the layout. But later it's clarified that the systems here appear to be similar to other debris the Academy has found from this era. However, Luuk's connection to the Court of Savante and his ability to read their script seems to be a bit more mysterious. When we ask him about it, he looks at us and smiles, saying,
"Let's just say I developed an interest in it, under unique circumstances."
We notice that the pen he's carrying has the Court of Savante characters on it. Luuk responds saying that he obtained it by chance, and that in fact, it happens to involve us. Now, even though it's just Rover, him, and Nivora in the room, Luuk says this isn't the place for that story and tells us to come by the Academy Infirmary, and he'll explain later. Now, whether there's something truly here or is it just misdirection, I don't know, but either way, this scene is yet another moment where Luuk's micro expressions, whether it be word choice or nonverbal cues, indicate that for some reason, he doesn't really have a lot of trust for Nivora. But going back to those holograms tell us a lot about this space station. We learn that the name of the space station is SkyArk, and this space station is from a time before the Etheric Sea phenomena enveloped Solaris. The purpose of this space station was to study star fragments and the Etheric Sea to answer questions of what the Etheric Sea is and what does it do and why does it appear. So as the hologram starts, we're introduced to a guide, Winlu. Winlu introduces us to the exhibit with droplets from the Etheric Sea, and she says that during the initial event, the Court of Savante witnessed a white-haired woman who then vanished in an instant. Of course, if you remember the start of the game, you likely have an idea of who Winlu is talking about. Of course, we don't know her name yet, but we have a really good idea of what this person looks like. We learned that they created a mass relay device that's actually powered by a sample of the Etheric Sea. And this mass relay device is at the center of this space station, and we later use it to travel to different areas of the station. We're told that this is their first major breakthrough and definitive proof of their theory that the Etheric Sea can be used as a gateway. The team on the SkyArk wants to use this to reach places on Solaris that no one has ever set foot before. We learned that a woman who was new to the SkyArk team was also instrumental in developing the mass relay device. Her name was Wei Ying. Now with this part of the story, if you're like me, when you played through this part, you noticed Rover's surprised expression. And you probably thought, who is Wei Ying? Why is Rover so surprised? How do we know her? Why did nothing happen after this surprised moment? Did I miss something? Well, I think maybe the pacing of this particular moment and the camera work kind of can be a bit confusing, at least to me. But after rewatching it, I discovered what this moment was actually meant to portray was Nivora messing around with the computer in the background. And this causes Wei Ying's part of the speech to not play. So Rover is just surprised at the abrupt cutoff of the hologram. And again, Luke's suspicious smiling glare is directed towards Nivora.
Shame the director's speech got cut off. Can't help but wonder what that colleague of his was going to say.
Winlu later tells us that these samples of star fragments and the Etheric Sea droplets were all collected in EVA missions by someone named Uncle Clemente. Collecting specimens is exhausting work. After every mission, he requires a full cycle and the recovery pod. Now this might not seem like much now, but we're going to circle back to it. While this space station looks very high-tech and futuristic, it was actually created a long time ago, which speaks to all the tech that has been lost over time. Nivora mentions that it's possible that this vessel was created before the Etheric Sea phenomena first appeared. Despite the amount of time since the space station fell, the data shows that it was briefly reactivated after years of silence. However, the actions taken after reactivation were only to seal hatches and lock equipment. After that, nothing else. Void matter should have already flooded the upper decks, but something had been containing it in the deepest parts of the station. When we finally get to the depths of the station, from beneath the rubble, a being known as the Nameless Explorer bursts forth and straight up folds and slides Nivora. So who is this Nameless Explorer? We actually know his name and his story, or at least part of it. His name is Clemente, the same Uncle Clemente Winlu's hologram mentioned earlier. Here, he's still in his EVA space gear. Now, Clemente was the only person to survive the crash, and that's because, as mentioned earlier, after every mention, he required a full cycle in the recovery pod. When he had awoken and exited the pod, he was immediately contaminated with void matter. Knowing that he would eventually lose his mind due to the contamination, he's the one who initiated the lockdown to contain all the corruption to the lower portion of the station. Although at this point, everyone had already died anyway. Nonetheless, what we're fighting here is a husk of what's left of Clemente. After defeating Clemente, the Nameless Explorer, Luuk checks for other threats while we continue to check out the room and the station. And that's when we stumble across a crazy video about our past.
minerals falling straight from the Etheric Sea.
So maybe I'll go more in depth on the implications of this mysterious recording in another video. But for now, let's continue on. So Luuk recommends that we keep what we saw private and not leave it for the Academy's team to find. The reason? There's a nest of competing factions, all vying for information about us. So anything connected to our past needs to be handled with the utmost discretion. After this, Luuk asks, what do we think as leader of the Black Shores? And we're just like, what? We're just like, WTF. Very few people know about that. So Luuk definitely knows a lot, like way too much about us. So we just ask him directly. Be direct with us, Luuk. We know you knew us from before, but we mostly acted as a bloom bearer in the past. Rover says, you and I, what exactly are we to one another? And Luuk gives a kind of vague roundabout answer. Luuk simply says, we were friends, not the buddy-buddy type, but we trusted him a great deal. Luuk says we met by chance and we just hit it off, and we entrusted him to a long-term assignment. He sums up our connection with one phrase, saying strangers in passing who became confidants. Luuk once again reminds us to be discreet about this video situation. Essentially, he's like, hey man, I would really keep this video you stumbled upon under wraps, because if it gets out, there's a lot of different groups who want this information. This could create the need for quite the cleanup operation. Luuk says years ago, after we suddenly disappeared, people were lining up to unpack our history. However, Solaris's golden boy is forever a mystery. And we basically deduced that he's basically saying that he played a role in making sure our secrets stay hidden. So we thank him. Luuk notes that we're not the same as when we first met, and what he is referring to is, like I talked about in the previous video, after resetting ourselves, this time Rover seems much lighter, less brooding, and just a happier, more hopeful person. The memory of being stranded on Solaris and the sadness of being cut off and rejected by our homeland is gone, or at least this time around so far. Anyways, Luuk says, as a doctor, it is his duty to stay and take care of Nivora until the rescue team arrives, and he tells us to continue on without him. And from this point on, we continue our quest with Imeth. See man, I told you this part of the quest has so many interesting things, and I felt like it deserved its own video, which is why I separated this part out of my last breakdown of the quest. But anyways, let me know what you guys think about this part of the quest down in the comments below. That is all I have for you guys today. Until next time, I'll catch you in the waves. Peace.